My vision warped in and out, swirling through millennia like sand in a windstorm. Each blink felt longer, the world solidifying. First, there was overwhelming cold, bone deep and relentless. Then, the sensation of movement, tilting and jostling. At last, a wash of heat. It pricked my skin like 1,000 insects, not unpleasant, but unfamiliar after the stasis of the frozen tomb. Then came light. Not our golden desert sun, but something blue, white and piercing. It seared through my still closed eyelids, forcing them open. For a moment, the shock was so great it blurred the faces above me. Not faces. No, muzzles. Eyes like black glass beads glittered in long, bony snouts. I was surrounded by a pack of tall, spindly figures, their thin skin stretched tight over strange, angular skeletons. Clothing wrapped them in strips of white, something gauzy like the linen we'd lay over mummies. Yet, instead of the scent of resin and natron, a sterile tang filled the air. A hand touched my face, four-fingered and delicate. Their skin felt rubbery, too smooth. I recoiled, my first attempted movement sending a jolt of pain through muscles long atrophied. My voice, when I found it, was a rusty croak. What? Who? Terror had seized me, a tighter fist than any mummification bindings ever had. These were no tomb robbers, no simple thieves. Whatever they were, they exuded a power older, stranger, their mere touch sending jolts of tingling disquiet through me. They responded in a clattering, hissing language, like the rustling of dead palm leaves. I understood none of it. My hand twitched towards my chest, searching for my royal seal, the cartouche. But my fingers met only rough bandages where once smooth, painted robes used to be. My eyes flew wide, panic replacing simple disorientation. They had stripped me. Stripped me of finery, of power, of the very symbols that declared me Pharaoh. Where am I? I choked out in my native tongue. Surely someone would understand. Surely someone could explain where those I knew, those I ruled over, had gone. They looked at each other. One of the figures made a sharp, chirping sound that I guessed passed for communication among them. With unsettling care, it extended a hand toward me again. Who are you? This time, my voice held steel. Whatever these creatures intended, I wouldn't be some relic found in the dust for them to gawk at. Another stepped forward, this one holding a smooth black object. Aiming it at my head, it made a soft clicking sound. Immediately, a voice responded through the stillness of the air. Mechanical, flat, but undeniably speaking my own language. We are your saviors, Pharaoh Khamun. The name. It sparked something within me, a memory deep beneath the frozen fog of ages. Khamun. Yes, I had been Khamun, ruler of the two lands, the living embodiment of Horus. It felt more like recalling a dream than claiming an identity. Saviors? I managed a rasping laugh. From what? What trickery is this? If I was dead, the gods would have judged me. My Ka would have journeyed to Aru. You have been dead, Pharaoh, the voice corrected. For far longer than your gods ever accounted for. My head swam. This was a nightmare, a fever vision conjured by my frozen brain. And yet, the pain in my limbs was too vivid, the fear in my gut too real. One of the lanky creatures approached again, this one holding a strange gleaming disc. It touched the device and a scene flickered into existence before me, a shimmering projection hanging in the air. My pulse quickened despite my disbelief. It showed the world I knew, the familiar sweep of the Nile, the golden sands, the great stone pyramids piercing the sky. But something was wrong. It all felt aged. Weathered in a way no mere centuries could achieve. The river's course was slightly altered, and the lushness along its banks had faded as if the desert had begun to reclaim its dominion. And the pyramids that had been my pride, my eternal monument, were worn. Their surfaces were rough where they had once gleamed, their once sharp points softened into rounded humps. Impossible, I breathed, my voice catching. Yet, a tendril of fear sprouted in my chest, wrapping its thorny grasp around my heart. Time is a relentless force, Pharaoh. Even stone yields to it, the mechanical voice chimed again. I wanted to shriek at it, to demand they take me back, but the words lodged in my throat. It was the truth. Stone weathered. Yet, my monuments were meant to outlast weathering, to be my testament long after my flesh turned to dust. How long? My voice was a bare whisper now. How long has it been? The projection in the air changed. It zoomed in on the side of my own great pyramid. There, carved into the stone blocks, were not my symbols, not the markings of my illustrious reign. Instead, strange, jagged lines covered it, forming crude, unfamiliar etchings. 5,000 years. The emotionless voice pierced the silence of my disbelief. 5,000 years. It was unfathomable. An eternity, several eternities by any measure I knew. My people would be gone, my cities dust. The very gods themselves might have turned their faces from a world they no longer recognized. A choked sob escaped me, a raw, animal noise from the depths of my despair. A flicker of what might have been pity crossed the strange creature's face. Grief is understandable, Pharaoh. Much has changed, it offered in that flat, mechanical voice. We found you entombed, frozen in a way your own people could not have achieved. It piqued our interest. Why? I spat out the word, venom lacing it. I was some trinket to them now, an artifact from a dead age. Why disturb my rest? I demanded eternity in the afterlife, not this. The creature inclined its head. To study you, at first. Your preservation was remarkable. Then, curiosity turned to something more. Hope? A new voice cut in. This one was different, lacking the translator's hollow drone. It was smoother, resonant even, with only the barest hint of an unfamiliar accent. One of the creatures stepped aside, and another figure came into view. Tall like them, but fleshier, curves where the others possessed only harsh angles. Her hair was the color of midnight and held ramrod straight posture far exceeding even any of my high priests. But it was her eyes that held me captive, a startling emerald green set against warm brown skin. Human. At least, far closer to humans than the unsettling beings that surrounded her. You have ruled before, Pharaoh, she continued, studying me with the intense gaze of a hunting falcon. History is replete with your kind, men born with the drive to lead, to shape the world to their will. My mouth felt like a kiln-baked desert. My kind is gone, I ground out. Dust, scattered by millennia. Perhaps not. The bloodline of a pharaoh, preserved through generations? It is a possibility. Her lips curved in a smile that sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't a gesture of warmth, but rather the baring of teeth by a predator assessing its prey. And why would you need someone like me? My suspicion outweighed even my growing despair. Pharaoh, the world has changed, she said simply. New empires have risen, ones that make your beloved Egypt seem but a quaint shadow. This galaxy, and ones beyond, are ripe for the taking. We need a leader. Someone who understands power, its uses, its necessities. I saw it in her eyes then. Not the glint of a benevolent scientist, nor merely the scheming of a power-hungry opportunist. This woman, she savored conflict, reveled in dominion. My instincts roared to life, instincts honed over a lifetime of court intrigue and the harsh realities of rule. I wasn't a curiosity to them, a piece of history. I was a weapon. Tell me, Common, she purred, her voice a silken trap. Are you the pharaoh we seek? The chilling thought echoed in my mind, perhaps I had bartered away one tomb for a far larger, far darker one. They gave me back my body, but it was different. The sleep of ages hadn't simply withered me. There was an alien energy humming beneath my skin, a side effect of their revival process. At first, it was just quickness, my limbs reacting faster than my still groggy mind could command. Then came the strength, an effortless surge with each movement as if the very air thinned for me alone. They noticed, of course. Their eyes, those black obsidian beads hidden behind translucent lids, widened with each test I passed, each feat they made me demonstrate. It was no longer the gaze of a scientist upon a specimen, but the wary assessment of a hunter sizing up potential prey. The woman, they called her commander, as if my own grand titles were dust in their mouths, became my constant shadow. She fed me their flavorless concoctions and watched as I consumed them, as if expecting them to transform me into some monstrous aberration before her eyes. The enhancements are unprecedented, she murmured one day, more to herself than to me. Her voice lacked its usual bite, tinged with an undercurrent I couldn't name yet. Fear, perhaps, or its close cousin, awe. My answer was a noncommittal grunt. They'd given me strength, yes, but I'd yet to decipher its true nature or its potential cost. Were these strange forces a gift, or a curse wrapped in the guise of salvation? Their training, when it came, was swift and brutal. They sought to harness the raw power coursing through me, to turn it into a weapon. I learned to strike with a force that shattered their testing dummies, and to move with a speed that left blurred afterimages hanging in the air. Yet, they avoided teaching me the intricacies of their own technology, wary of arming a pharaoh who might turn their own tools against them. Then came the whispers. At mealtimes, when they thought me lost in the blandness of their rations, I'd catch their sibilant hisses. Words like instability, potential threat, and most tellingly, containment. They were no longer my saviors, they were jailers, and I their increasingly dangerous charge. One night, I acted. It began with a headache, a familiar ache from the days before embalming, but sharper, like 1,000 needles pressing against my skull from within. Then came the flickering of their lights. I focused on the thrumming energy in their power cores, feeling it echoing strangely with the pulse beating behind my eyes. The lights sputtered, then plunged the room into darkness. Their shouts were filled with startled confusion, a disharmony I savored. Blind in the artificial night, they were as helpless as my tomb robbers had been millennia ago. I moved then, a ghost fueled by the alien power within me. Their panicked cries guided my fists and fueled my rage. When the lights finally flickered back on, the room was a scene of carnage. Bodies lay sprawled in unnatural angles, their spindly forms broken and still. The commander, however, was nowhere to be seen. I was alone in a chamber streaked with their strange, faintly glowing blood. The taste of it was metallic on my tongue, the victory bitter. Had I merely traded one gilded cage for another? It was true that their facility was now mine, their soldiers now broken fodder for the carrion birds. But was this freedom? I touched the wall where they'd once projected images of a world I no longer recognized. The cold, smooth surface didn't yield. But as I pressed, I felt a faint hum, the throb of dormant energy. A memory surfaced, dredged from the depths of my time in their labs. The commander, her emerald eyes narrowed with distrust, demonstrating the controls of a transport vessel. I'd memorized the sequence, even as I feigned subservience. Power thrummed through me again, the pain in my skull intensifying to a scream I choked back. Focusing that power, willing it to respond, the wall shimmered and yielded, not to stone and sand, but to the star-dusted blackness of space. I hesitated only a moment. The world out there might be as hostile as the one I left behind, a galaxy full of new threats to replace the old. Yet, a familiar voice echoed in my mind, a voice as old as the desert wind. It was the voice of a pharaoh, of a conqueror, of a man who had stared unflinchingly into the abyss of death itself. They say cats have 9 lives. It seems some pharaohs get at least 2. I stepped forward into the darkness, the alien power in my veins both my curse and, perhaps, the key to dictating my own fate amidst the stars. And I knew one certainty, whatever dangers the galaxy held, they would soon learn one name. Kamun. My escape hadn't been a clean one. The commander, tenacious as a desert viper, had been waiting at the transport vessel. A jagged shard of some composite material jutted from her hand, a crude weapon in the face of my newfound power, but wielded with desperate fury. The fight was brutal, leaving trails of glowing blood and singed metal across the vessel's pristine floor. But in the end, she was still flesh and brittle bone against the unnatural force coiling within me. With their leader gone, the aliens on this outpost never stood a chance. Some tried to fight, their sleek weapons pathetically ineffective against my whirlwind of fists and the crackling energy I now flung. Others scattered, terrified chirps echoing through the corridors. But I gave them no reprieve. Each dispatched alien sent a ripple of strength through me, the alien energy absorbed into my own. It was intoxicating, a dark echo of the offerings I'd once demanded of my conquered foes. The power sang a chorus of conquest in my veins. These creatures weren't my saviors, their gifts had only forged me into their conqueror. I found them cowering in their central control hub. Their machines hummed and flickered in disarray, their grand technology now as vulnerable as straw huts before a storm. My voice, when I found it, echoed from the walls, amplified by their communication systems. Your commander is dead, I announced, savoring the tremor in their hissing voices. Your soldiers are nothing but broken toys. This facility is mine. One brave, or foolish, soul dared to reply. You cannot contain the power. It rasped in their choppy translation. It will destroy you. If it does, I retorted, the power coiling deliciously tight in my chest, I shall become a god, and you will burn as offerings at my feet. Their world wasn't difficult to find. With one of their own vessels, I traced the star charts I'd stolen from their network. It was a world of glass and metal, the natural landscape tamed and twisted into gleaming, towering structures. Their kind swarmed everywhere, tiny figures amidst their arrogant monuments. My arrival split their sky open. The transport vessel, scarred but functional, tore through their atmosphere, a blazing defiance against their sleek, aerodynamic designs. I did not land in some display of parley. Instead, I crashed the vessel into their central nexus, a tangle of command structures and energy hubs. It exploded in a satisfying roar, and my laughter echoed over their frantic communications. I emerged from the wreckage wreathed in fire and smoke. Their weapons washed over me with harmless flashes of light. The power thrumming beneath my skin turned aside their pathetic attempts at stopping me. Soldiers, politicians, workers, they all scattered as I advanced, the devastation cracking their ordered world at its core. Yet, I did not eliminate them all. A lesson learned amidst the sands of Egypt was that fear was a far more potent tool than slaughter. I took their communication centers, their grand halls of leadership, their very temples to their advancements. With each conquered structure, I broadcast my face, the face of an ancient king now resurrected as a dark messiah. Their words were no longer hisses and chirps, but pleas for mercy. Yet a pharaoh grants mercy when it strengthens his rule, not weakens it. I let them live, but under a new order. My first decree was that their language, their script, were forbidden. Only Egyptian hieroglyphs would adorn their new monuments, monuments built in my honor. Their artists would learn to depict the power of the pharaoh, their engineers would exhaust themselves crafting statues to my greatness, their scientists would turn their knowledge toward understanding and harnessing the power I wielded. Those who disobeyed learned swift retribution. With but a thought, I could topple their gleaming towers, shatter their precious machines. I was plague and tempest and unyielding authority all wrapped in one. They began to refer to me not as common, not as Pharaoh, but simply as he of the power. My empire among the stars won't be built through peace, but through a terror they never imagined when they unearthed my frozen tomb. I will make them rue the day they dared disturb the sleep of a pharaoh, for even in this strange new world, among the star-flecked skies, some rules are as eternal as the desert sands. They wished to create a weapon. They succeeded. And now, that weapon would carve his own name into the fabric of their galaxy, a name whispered in fearful awe for millennia to come. The alien cities transformed. Glass and gleaming metal surrendered to rough-hewn stone. Their sleek, functional designs warped, now adorned with towering obelisks and brooding sphinxes. At my command, they carved my image not only into these edifices but onto the very landscape itself. My face, cold and regal, gazed down from mountainsides and rose in colossal effigies from their tame seas. My dominion wasn't merely physical. It seeped into their minds, invading their dreams and twisting their arts. Their symphony orchestras, once filled with shimmering complexities, now pounded out a single note, a relentless drumbeat mirroring my pulse, the pulse of their subjugation. Their painters abandoned subtle gradients for harsh pigments of gold, black, and blood red, the colors of a pharaoh's reign. And then there were the temples. Oh, they'd had places of worship, sterile chambers dedicated to concepts like rational thought and the betterment of species. I swept them aside, replacing them with structures born of ancient memory yet warped by the alien power within me. These were not places for meek prayer, but monuments to awe and terror. Within their shadowy depths, I conducted rituals only half remembered from shadowed corners of my tomb. Sacrifices were made, not of bulls or prize doves, but of their brightest minds, those who dared question my rule. Witnessing the energy of their very life flare and fade, absorbed into my being, quelled further descent like a desert wind snuffing a candle. I took one of their females as my high priestess. A cruel twist of fate, perhaps, considering the commander's role in my revival. This one, however, was not a warrior. She was a scholar, a historian of their kind, her eyes wide with a desperate blend of fascination and fear. It was she who unraveled their records, unearthing the names of their forgotten deities and the ways their forefathers had appeased them. We twisted these ancient rites. Their technology became the altars, their energy flows the sacrificial blood. And as their pleas to forgotten gods echoed unanswered, replaced by the crackling hum of my own unstable power, their faith crumbled. I became their god, not by declaration, but by unassailable demonstration. But even a divine pharaoh cannot rule through might alone. My empire, like the one built along the fertile Nile, needed an infrastructure of fear and loyalty. The soldiers, once so arrogantly assured in their technological superiority, became my enforcers. They were branded with my royal cartouche, a searing mark upon their spindly flesh. The sight of my mark began to incite the same instinctive terror my presence commanded. And for those not broken into submission, there was always re-education. Their schools, once bastions of their advancement, churned out not inventors and explorers, but scribes and masons. Their language faded, replaced by the harsh beauty of hieroglyphs. I molded their youth into builders, into worshippers, into the willing bricks of my new and terrible reign. Yet, amidst the conquest, a sliver of unease gnawed at me. The alien energy I wielded was a tempestuous ally. Sometimes it surged, sending tremors throughout their conquered world, a stark reminder that my power could as easily turn on me as it did on them. Other times, it lay dormant, leaving me feeling strangely hollow, as if I were a mere mortal once more. I needed to master this force, to truly transform it into a tool of my will. It was then I turned my attention to the outposts, the furthest edges of their empire I'd only spared for strategic purposes. Among them was a world of ice, of howling storms far worse than any the desert could conjure. It was a place their kind shunned, a harsh and unforgiving realm. Perfect. I descended on this glacial wasteland alone. Here, with no eyes to witness failure, I would confront the darkness within. I would wrestle this alien energy into submission or die amidst the frozen expanse, leaving my mark not of conquest, but of a Pharaoh finally, and truly, laid to rest amidst the unforgiving elements. For even in my godlike state, I knew a truth the aliens had tried and failed to master: some forms of power defy ownership. They demand more than dominion, they demand sacrifice. And whether this sacrifice would lead to my ultimate triumph or my ultimate downfall remained a prophecy only the frozen winds could whisper. The blizzard had teeth. It tore at my flesh, not with the clean slice of a sword but with a relentless assault of a million icy shards. Beneath the pain, deeper than the creeping numbness, the alien energy pulsed erratically in my veins. Each howling gust echoed with the voices of vengeful gods and forgotten pharaohs. I retreated, not to my conquered cities, but to the depths of a glacier. Ice sealed me in, a tomb mirroring my ancient one yet infinitely more hostile. The cold that stung my skin was nothing compared to the frigid clarity it brought my mind. This was not some test of endurance, it was a reckoning. The energy coursing through me wasn't mine to command. It was a borrowed storm seeking a vessel, and my arrogance had blinded me to the price my body, my very soul, might yet pay. Control was an illusion, there was only negotiation, a chilling pact to be struck. Days bled into weeks, or perhaps months. Time loses its meaning in the belly of a glacier. I starved, but there was a different hunger now, a void the alien force sought to fill. Images flickered through my frozen mind, the terror in the aliens' eyes, the crumbling of their monuments, the way my high priestess flinched, yet could not tear her gaze away. Was this the cost? To become a force of nature, bound not by compassion or reason but an endless hunger for destructive power? My ancestors, the great builders, would have wept. And yet, as the line blurred between life and frozen death, there was a flicker of defiant warmth deep within me, a stubborn ember refusing to be extinguished. I was common, who had tamed tribes and rivers. Would I be mastered by a force born in the cold heart of a dying star? I reached then, not outward with fists that could shatter cities, but inward. I plumbed the depths of memory, seeking a different strength. Not the roar of conquest, but the quiet command of a pharaoh who knew his people's names. The faces of my wives, long turned to dust, swam before me. The scent of lotus blossoms, the hushed awe of a child as it beheld my pyramid rising from the sands. These were my anchors, these the fragments of who I was and who I refused to surrender. The alien energy thrashed against this defiance, yet it couldn't snuff out that human spark. A bargain was struck in the heart of the ice, a wordless pact more binding than any carved into stone. I would wield this power, it would not wield me. I would feed it, for it was insatiable, but I would choose what it consumed. The glacier cracked. Not like the violent shattering of my arrival, but a slow, yawning release. I emerged, forever altered. My eyes carried the glint of the frozen storm, my skin held an undertone of twilight blue. I was still common, but reborn in a crucible of ice and tempered by a pact with a power both terrible and beautiful. My first act upon returning was to release half of the alien population. Not in mercy, but strategy. My empire could not thrive solely through terror, it needed roots of industry and innovation. Roots they were better equipped to grow, as long as these roots served only me. The high priestess, when I summoned her, flinched at the sight of me, the change I radiated. Word of the pharaoh who had vanished into the ice and returned as something more, something touched by the divine or the demonic depending on who dared whisper the tale, spread like wildfire. New sacrifices must be found, I told her, my voice echoing with the quiet rumble of an approaching storm. Her eyes widened, both in fear and a sliver of terrible fascination. Where? Who? She stammered. My smile was a thin line etched upon my forever changed face. The galaxy is vast, my priestess. Surely among the countless stars, there are those who yearn to appease a new and terrible god. This was not the end. It was merely the beginning. My empire among the stars might yet rival the one I'd built among the sands, but it would be built on different foundations, fear and awe, yes, but also upon a delicate balance of harnessed destruction and calculated expansion. For I, common, had gambled not only with the aliens' technology, but with a force more capricious than any desert wind. In the end, the gamble may consume me, body and soul. But should I succeed, if I could truly master this dark storm within, then the stars themselves would tremble at my name.